Hey, watch the guitar. Psycho 3 stars Anthony Perkins, Diana Scarwood, Jeff Fahey, and is directed by Anthony Perkins. Guys, if you haven't figured out, I am in a huge Psycho mood lately. I did Psycho 2 and 3 last week for 31 Days of October. I reviewed Psycho 2, dropped that yesterday, and you know, I figured, hey, why not go ahead and do Psycho 3 as well? This movie is very special to me, and we'll get into that. But first, let's get into the story. Psycho 3, the story takes a little bit of a shift on this one, which I found refreshing. It starts off with this nun named Maureen, and she is questioning her faith. The very opening line of this movie is, "There is no God." And she wants to kill herself, but then an accident happens, and one of the other nuns actually ends up dying. So she ends up leaving, and where does she end up? You guessed it, the Bates Motel. And she ends up at the Bates Motel at the same time as a drifter, Dwayne, played by the great Jeff Fahey. But Norman, he is settling in with his home life, and he ends up falling in love with Maureen. But as you all know, Norman has a duality about him, and he is constantly struggling with his mother and Maureen. Now, before I go any further, let me just say that this review is probably going to have some spoilers in it, because I'm sure if you are a horror fan, you've probably seen Psycho 3. Although I think you're safe to watch the review because this isn't really set up like a whodunit. I'm not going to say any more, enter at your own risk, but I don't think it's going to hurt you to listen to this review. So, let me tell you my personal experience with this movie. This was the one and only movie that I'd ever seen at a drive-in movie theater. So it holds a special place with me. I was around 13 years old, I believe. It was 1986, and my sister was going on a date with her boyfriend. I wanted to go to a horror movie. You know, I was very curious. I hadn't seen too many horror movies before that point. So they snuck me in the trunk of their car, and we drove into the drive-in movie theater, and I watched this and The Hills Have Eyes Part 2, and it was just such a cool experience, and it's one that I hold near and dear to this day. And I think it is a big reason why I have such an interest in drive-in movie theaters. I constantly am on the lookout for them. I've even done a video on my channel because there was an abandoned drive-in movie theater here in my hometown. And I'll even post a card here so you can actually see that video. That was a good time. Okay guys, we are walking in to the concession stand of the Martin Theater. But the big question you want to know is Psycho 3 good? And I will say yes. In my opinion, it's a really good sequel. I enjoy this one. First thing is it doesn't, tread in the same constant territory as the previous two movies. It ventures out a little bit, and the way it does that with some interesting new characters. First off, Maureen. It's interesting to have this character who is questioning her faith, and she is just very emotional in this movie. But not to the point where she's annoying. Norman really is that person that comforts her, which I find interesting because Norman is really a deadly type of person. Now Norman, he's very similar to the way he is in the first Psycho movie. He is the killer. The reason I said that's not much of a spoiler is because they established that early on in the movie, and it's not really set up like a whodunit. But there's a scene where the iconic hole in the wall and Norman looking through at Maureen taking a shower. Then Mother takes over and he's going to go in and kill her, but then he sees that she is attempted suicide. And so that's kind of where the story takes a shift. That's where he starts falling for Maureen. And so then there's this constant battle between Norman's two psyches, his mother and himself. Also, Jeff Fahey really just steals the show in this. He is that comic relief that you need because there's some serious stuff going on in this one. And he has that funny line, "Hey, watch the guitar." And he says that like a couple times throughout the movie. But he is really just that character that is really a scumbag, but you can't help but be entertained by him. But the ironic thing is he's constantly saying, "Hey, watch the guitar." And then how does he get killed? You guessed it, Norman bashes him over the head with his own guitar. Love it. Also, there's this curious reporter, Tracy, and she is on the hunt for a good story. So she's constantly pestering Norman throughout the movie. And she plays a big part at the very end. And let's talk about that for a sec. I actually enjoyed that scene because this is where Norman just goes full tilt. Mother takes over. Really, this is the ultimate showdown between Norman and Mother because Norman eventually stabs his dead mother, and that's how he defeats Mother. But he ends up going to jail anyway. But I love that last scene because he finally feels free. It's awesome that he actually keeps his dead mother's hand and he's rubbing on it, so that's just a really creepy scene. And a word on the kills. The kills are really 80s style-ish in this, but they're really good kills. I mean, they're primal, you know, it's just with a basic kitchen knife, and that weapon works really well for Norman. And there's one scene that really emulates the shower scene in the original movie. And if you watch it frame by frame, it's very similar, and it's the local that hooks up with Dwayne in the movie, who actually was in the movie Friday the 13th Part 5, but I don't want to sidestep. But yeah, that scene is very similar to the kill in the original Psycho. And I also have to talk about the score in this movie by Carter Burwell. It's a very interesting sounding score. It's definitely got some 80s vibes to it, but the opening cue is really captivating and interesting sounding. And it's one of those familiar scores that you can't get out of your head after. I think out of all the scores, Psycho 3 might be one of my favorites. And lastly, I gotta talk about Anthony Perkins again. I mean, he really just owns this role. I can't say that enough. In my mind, Norman Bates is one of the most interesting characters to ever be on the silver screen. And that is because of Anthony Perkins. Anthony Perkins actually directed this movie, and you know what? He does a damn good job. Now, as far as any cons, there are some throwaway characters. You got all the football fans that show up, and they're really just slasher fodder. They're basically there to provide a means for some more kills. But overall, guys, Psycho 3 is a really good entry in the series, and I'll definitely give it a purchase worthy. And believe it or not, I have never seen Psycho 4, the beginning, I think it's called. So I'm looking forward to watching that one and then getting a review out. So anyway, guys, what are your thoughts on Psycho 3? Looking forward to hearing them. Oh, and before I go, I wanted to give two shout outs, one of my older subscribers and one of my newer subscribers. First off is Mesmerized for Life, or Jay Anthony. He constantly supports me. If I post one of my videos on Twitter, he constantly retweets it. He supports what I do because he loves movies, and I think that's awesome. I consider him a great friend. So thank you, Jay. And then the next one is one of my newer subscribers. His name is Robert Schumann, and he has really just been watching a lot of my videos and being really supportive, and I think he enjoys a lot of the movies that I like, and he's been really cool. So Robert, I wanted to give you a shout out too as well. Thank you very much. I appreciate your support, and really I appreciate all my support of all my subscribers. Without you guys, I am nothing. Make sure you join the Killer Flicks Facebook group where we talk horror all day, every day. Follow me on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Letterboxd, and Drumdum out.